Hello and welcome to today's session. Today we will review the Fortis to Sage 300 integration. Today we will review sales orders to invoicing, and we'll do that using a saved card, a one-time card involving a level 3 transaction, and a card present using a terminal transaction. We'll move on to look at ACH transactions, and we'll do that using the accounts receivables module. Next, we'll review the batch auto payment of invoice process, and this is for a recurring or scheduled payment that is designed to flow via Sage 300's recurring invoicing screen. Next, we'll look at our click to pay transactions and how payments can be made via the click to pay link. Finally, we'll get to refunds, and we'll look at how the user can refund a payment made by through Zeemster. Once we've looked at all those transactions, we'll take a look at the setup screens and what's involved in configuring the Zeemster Sage 300 integration. So those are the topics we're going to cover on our session today. I'm going to go ahead and open up my Sage 300 company. And now we're on Sage 300 demo data, and I'm going to show you our Zeemster module. Our integration is designed as a module. On my left, you can see the Zeemster module. Once I click that, it displays the icons related to Zeemster. We've got our Zeemster transactions, Zeemster setup, and Zeemster customers. Within the Zeemster transactions menu, I can start with my transaction processing. So the first transaction we will do today is our saved card pre-auth for a sales order. So order number 164, I've configured, and I will go ahead and do a pre-authorization on this sales order. Tax, that's 109.5. I'm going to go ahead and do a pre-auth on this order, and you can see the pre-auth button is to the right of the Zeemster logo. Once I click pre-auth, it will take me to my credit card processing screen. From there, I can select a one-time card or a vaulted card. In this scenario, I'm going to select a vaulted card. I'm going to click on my search or my finder and select the appropriate card. So I'll select my 1200 Corp. I'll do pre-auth, and that's going to go out to my Zeemster portal and get my authorization code, status, amount, and the date of that pre-authorization. So that's the process of pre-authorizing a sales order. The next process I will look at is what we call quick pre-authorization, and a quick pre-authorization allows us to eliminate the extra step of going to the credit card processing screen and selecting a card to be processed. The way that this works is that the customer's record has a saved card or a default saved card on the record, and so we can just authorize that card with this transaction or for this transaction. So this transaction is for customer 1200, pre-tax $200, with tax that's $219. I'm going to go ahead here and do quick authorization. And again, that's going to go out to the portal and bring back my authorization information. So here we can see we are pre-authorized for the including tax amount of $219 with my pre-authorization code. Now, we can also void the pre-authorization from the screen. So if we have a situation where we need to change any information on the sales order with regards to our quantities or the price on the sales order, then we would need to get an additional authorization. And to do that, we have to void the existing authorization and then go ahead and run another authorization on that transaction. So to void the authorization, I'm going to go ahead and select void pre-auth on this existing order that I pre-authorized. So I'll go ahead and hit void pre-authorization, say yes to the message that asks, do I want to? And now the order is no longer pre-authorized. So we've reviewed our quick and or pre-authorization process. Next process I want to show you here is the ability to do a batch capture of or pre-authorizations. So in the cases where a user or a client has multiple users responsible for processing, they'll have a user that does the orders with the pre-auth, someone else that's going to go ahead and ship the products out to their customers, and then finally there will be someone responsible for doing the invoicing and capturing of those pre-authorization. So this screen is designed to help the user to be more efficient in that process, where they are able to select the orders that have been pre-authorized and shipped and are able to invoice and capture those pre-authorizations at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead here and select my Go button, and that's going to populate my screen with any order that has been shipped and pre-authorized and is available to be captured and invoiced. So from the screen here, I can select which ones I want to process. In this case, there's only one order. So order number 177 for 604.78, I'm going to go ahead and do capture and invoice on this. So the other options that are on the screen lets me print my invoice out after the capture process. For today's session, I won't click that option. I'm going to go ahead here and do capture and invoice. So once I do capture an invoice, the system's going to go ahead and generate my invoice for this transaction, as well as capture this this transaction via the Zeemster portal. So now it just tells me that the transactions have been created, and I can click OK. So those are the processes for authorizing and capturing of the saved card transactions. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you a saved card captured on an accounts receivables invoice. So what we're doing here is using a accounts receivable receipt screen and capturing a payment on an invoice. So the invoice has already been created, it's already been sent out to my customer, then my customer comes back and says, I want to be able to pay this card via this transaction or this invoice via a credit card. So we go ahead and we go into my Zeemster accounts receivable receipt screen. I create a new batch. And in fact, I already have a batch set up. So let's select my batch 134. And I have this transaction to process. So let's do a customer 1520. And let's charge this customer for this invoice. So my customer has a payment code of Visa. They have an invoice here for invoice number 42 for 660.76. And then to the right of my Zeemster icon, I have the ability to charge this customer. So I'm going to hit charge. And once again, I am using a vaulted card or a saved card. So I'm going to go ahead and select from my list my vaulted card that's available. This customer has just one vaulted card. So I'll select that card and I'll do charge. And this is going to now charge or capture this payment. So now we've got our status of approved and my amount here, 660.76, matching the amount for the invoice. So again, this is a capture. So now this transaction can be posted and I've made a payment against this invoice. Yes, I want to post my batch. So that's all the transactions looking at a saved or vaulted card. Now I'll go ahead and do a transaction using a terminal.
This conference will now be recorded.
For this process, I'm going to go ahead and use a card present or a terminal transaction. So on screen, we're looking at my Zeemster shipment screen. I've selected order number 167. I'm going to go ahead and ship this order out to my customer. I'm going to do post. And now I will invoice this order. I'm going to go on to my invoicing screen and invoice this order. So I'm going to select that order that I just shipped, which was order number 167. So now I'm on my Zeemster invoice entry screen. My amount here, pre-tax, $299.95. With tax, that's going to be $328.45. Now on this screen, I'm going to go ahead and do a capture of the transaction, and this is done via the prepayment option. So to the right of my Zeemster button or my Zeemster icon, I have my prepayment option. When I select that prepayment, it will take me to my Zeemster OE prepayment screen. On this screen, I'm going to select a batch or create a new batch. And this is an accounts receivable AR receipt batch that is being created. So I'm creating this batch, and I can put a description in here that says this is Zeemster payments for today's date. And this batch can be used for all transactions for today. So every time I'm going to capture an invoice or a prepayment on a transaction, I can use this batch, and then I can post that as a deposit to my bank. So I'm going to select my bank, and the payment code for this customer is Visa. So we're going to go ahead and charge. So I have my Zeemster credit card radio button selected. I'm going to go ahead and charge my $328.45. And that takes me to my credit card processing screen. On this screen, I'm now able to select the one-time card, select the terminal, and select one of the terminals that exist. Now, if a terminal was already assigned to this user, that terminal would be displayed here. But in this case, I need to select a terminal because this is the first time I'm using a terminal for this user. So I select John's terminal. I'm going to go ahead and do charge. And that now is going out to the terminal and awaiting approval. That transaction has now been approved via John's terminal. And that then we can post this invoice, and that transaction is created. No, I don't want to print. I'm going to go ahead and close my screen. And my next step in the process will be to look at a level 3 transaction using a one-time card. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my sales order screen, and I will select my order number 1x5. And we will do a prepayment on this order. So again, I'm going to be capturing the authorization or the approval on this card, and I'm going to do that using my prepayment process as opposed to doing an authorization or a quick authorization. So I hit my prepayment button. Again, I'm going to go ahead and select that batch that I created a minute ago, and I'm going to use my 503.20 as my amount and select my Zeemster credit card radio button. I'll go ahead and do charge. And again, my credit card processing screen comes up, and as you can see, it's already pre-selected a terminal because now that terminal is associated with my account. I'm not going to use a terminal for this transaction. I'm actually going to manually enter my card number. So I'm going to uncheck that option. I'm going to go ahead and do one-time card, do charge, and my payment form is displayed. I'll go ahead and put in my credit card number, my expiration date, and I'll put in an account holder here. So I'll just put my name and submit. So now I've got my authorization code and my last four of my card number. And I close the screen. And this transaction has been authorized. Okay, there we go. Took a minute to come back. And now you can see on screen my authorization code with my amount. So now that transaction is complete. I can post this order. And I won't print any documents at this point. Now what I'll do here, I'll take a pause and go onto the Zeemster portal and have us take a look at the transactions that we just ran through on the Zeemster portal. So let's sign in to our portal. Let's look at location A and transactions. So the last transaction we did was a one-time level 3 transaction. And I'm going to go ahead and click into the detail of this transaction so we can take a look at the level 3 data. So if I click on level 3 data, we're going to be able to see what our tax amount was, what our zip code is, what our product code is, and our commodity code on this particular transaction. So that is our level 3 data on this one-time transaction that we just went to. If we go back to our list, we'll see also the terminal transaction that we processed. On John's terminal, you can see that 328.45 was processed. Also, we created a transaction for 660 using my accounts receivables invoice, and we can click here into the detail of that, and we could see that transaction that was entered. You can see here what that transaction ID was. Now the transaction we did earlier was to do an authorization and a void. So you can see here that this one was voided for 219. The status is voided. And the previous one we did, or the very first one we did, is authorized only for 109.5. So those are the transactions on our portal. And our next item is to look at our ACH transactions. So let me minimize our portal for now. And we'll go over to accounts receivables to take a look at the way we process an ACH transaction. So if I open my Zeemster accounts receivables screen, I'm going to select my batch 90 that I've pre-populated. And I'm going to go ahead and choose my entry number 5, and for this entry, I'm going to do a prepayment for $800 plus taxes, $876, using an ACH transaction. Now the ACH is configured via the customer screen, and we'll review that shortly. So I go to prepayment. Now I'm in my AR prepayment screen. Again, I need to create a AR receipt batch. I can use the same one that I created earlier. And so that's my transactions for today. I'm going to do in fact, I want to do a different batch because I want my ACH to be in a different batch from my credit cards. So I'm going to create a different batch for my ACH transactions. And I'll select my bank code. I'll change my payment code to actually be ACH. And I'll select ACH as my transaction type. And I'll go ahead and charge this via ACH. So once I do that charge, it's going to come back with my authorization code and amount. Again, this is processing my payment using the ACH feature. I can save and post this batch, or I can just save this transaction. I'll go ahead and do my post. And now I've got that transaction posted in Zeemster as well. Now, let's look at another functionality within my accounts receivables, which is a batch or auto payment of invoices. So this is for my recurring payments. I use what we call a batch or auto pay feature. So here I'm in my Zeemster AR payment batch. And in this scenario, I've created the transactions using a specific terms code. So I've created a terms code for these transactions. It's called auto, so auto pay. And so I'm selecting that terms code here on screen. The user does have the ability to select or filter by a number of criteria here. So they have an option to choose what they want to use in order to filter the screen. But this screen is intended to help them to process recurring or scheduled payments. So once I've selected my auto for my terms, now I'm looking at all my transactions that fit that criteria, and I can decide to process all or just some of these transactions. So if I wanted to, by default, everything is set to apply, but I can change that by selecting none or selecting all. So I'll select none, and I'll go ahead and I'll process for today's session. I'll process these first two transactions. So if we go ahead and select apply yes for these two, I do process, this is going to go ahead and charge the customer's card with these two transactions. And again, when we look at our customer screen, we'll see where we've configured the customer to allow for auto payments on their accounts. So go ahead and do process payment, and this is going to go ahead and process those. So if we were to go back to our Zeemster portal, we'll see these two new transactions that we just captured on the portal. So in fact, let's just refresh our transactions here. Now we have 10,950 and 130.20. Those two transactions that we just processed via or recurring or scheduled payment feature. Next, we'll look at our click to pay functionality. So let's go ahead and take a look at our click to pay using our Zeemster order entry screen. I'm going to go ahead and select an order to be invoiced. So I'm going to select order number 173. And standard Sage functionality, there's nothing I have to change on the screen. I can go ahead and change the amount if I needed to, but in this case, there's nothing that changes. My pre-tax is $459.54, and my total with tax is $459.54. This particular customer is not taxable. So I'll go ahead and post my invoice. And now my invoice has been created. This is going to say, do I want to print the invoice? In this case, I'll say yes. I'll do print. And you can see on screen my invoice with my click to pay feature on screen. The plan is for the customer to receive this transaction via email or this invoice via email. So I'll go ahead and choose emailing to send this out to my customers by email. So I'm just using standard Sage functionality to email that out to the customer. And here is my invoice. Now here's my invoice with my click to pay feature. I can go ahead and do that, pay now. And here on screen, I can go ahead and make a payment for this invoice. I'll put in my credit card number. Comes up with our payments window. We can go ahead and fill in our credit card number as well as our expiration date. The amount, we can choose to pay the full amount or a partial amount of that invoice. So our invoice is $459.54, and we'll pay the full amount. I agree to pay the above, submit, and now my transaction has been approved and that is paid. If we wanted to go to my Zeemster portal, I can go ahead and see that in my quick invoices screen. I can see that invoice that I just created for $459.54 has been paid. If I wanted to view this in based on my contact, I could go ahead and select the contact A. Graham, and I'll see the invoices on this contact's record. I also have an email, which is the receipt that's been emailed to me for this transaction that I just processed. So you can see here, I received an email with my receipt of my payment and my approval status. Okay. Our next item is to look at our refunds and how that process works in Sage 300. So let's minimize our screens here. I'll close my windows and we'll go ahead and open up my Zeemster AR refund screen. So for this refund, I'm going to select a transaction that was previously paid by Zeemster or using the Zeemster portal. Select batch 7. And I'll go ahead and create a new entry. For my customer 1200, I'll refund. My prepayment number 62 here for 503. And I'll fill in the amount that I want to refund. I can refund the full amount or a part of that amount. I'm going to go ahead and refund $200. of this amount. And I'm going to just go ahead and do a credit. It tells me I have to save the transaction. So let's add that transaction. Let's go back and select to credit my transaction. So here we are, credit. And then it brings up my credit card processing screen. Now the payment is going to go back to the original method of payment. So what I do here is select apply credit, and that's going to go out to the portal and credit this transaction. So you can see here that the status is refunded. And now I can go ahead and close my screen. Refund successfully processed. I can go ahead and post this transaction or just close my screen. Now, once again, if we go to our portal and back to our locations and transactions, we'll see that $200 refund that was just processed. You can see that the type is a refund. So those are the transactions that we're going to look at today for our processing of Zeemster Sage 300 transactions. Now, the next portion of the session, we will review the setups that are needed for the Zeemster Sage 300 integration to process transactions.
This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to take you through the Zeemster setup process.